So I want to go over high rises in Houston because I've had some people asking me some questions, so I wanted to cover it. Now, as we know, there are big differences between the single-family dwelling, the townhome, and the high-rise. Okay, so the single-family, we all know, you own everything, right? You own the land, you own the house, it's a single-family contract, right? Then you've got the townhome. Now, the townhome, you own everything as well, but there may be some common areas. Like I had a townhome in Houston where I had a shared wall and roof. So that wall was part of the owner's wall. And the roof, if I wanted to get a new roof, I would get a new roof with the new owner when she could get the new roof. So there's some things you need to know about with townhomes and how the governing docs are set up. Then you go into the condo high-rise. And I'm not talking one-story condos. I'm talking about 1 or 2-story condos. I'm talking about high-rises in Houston. This is high-rises in Houston. So I've lived in high-rises in Houston, and I've represented a lot of buyers for high-rises in Houston. So I've been through many of these contracts. Now, the contract is completely different because it's a condominium contract, right? And you really need to know what you're doing when you put the condominium contract because there's a lot of things you have to think about because it's not a single-family dwelling and you don't own everything. You are a percentage owner in a condo. You own from the sheetrock in. That's your ownership of yours 100%. Everything else is owned on a percentage ownership of all the owners combined. And it goes by what you own and your share and all that. And then you've got governing docs with common areas and things like that. Okay. But the contract is very peculiar because you got to know how to do a high-rise contract in a condominium. Now, Houston high-rises. There's always been high-rises in Houston, but, it wasn't real big. Like, say, I moved to Houston in the 90s, right? In 1990, there were high-rises. There were some high-rises, but they just weren't a huge demand for high-rises. It was more of, people coming from different cities, people coming from New York. I remember a lot of people would come from New York that I knew, and they would rent the high-rises, right? Because you get used to high-rises in these big cities. So as time went on, we go into 2010, 2009, 2010, and there's a bigger push for high-rises. So you start seeing developments of high-rises in Houston. And the reason for that, and this is 2012, Houston was named the energy capital of the world. But before that, people are starting to come in from major cities. And major cities from around the globe. And most major cities have high-rises, right? You come in from New York, you come in from overseas somewhere. A lot of people are used to living in high-rises. So they start building a lot of high-rises, and it becomes real popular. Now, there's a lot. There's like this huge pouring of high-rises in Houston. Now high-rise is like caught up with the rest of these other big cities, and it's like big push for high-rises everywhere. So you can basically get a high-rise in Houston, and we're not talking, these high-rises can go up to $10, $15 million, okay? Or maybe more, but there's $1, $2, $3, $5 million high-rises. You can get into some, $500,000 high-rise. It just depends. I'm talking about high-rises. There's some mid-rises too. So that's kind of how the high-rise situation has evolved in Houston. It hasn't always been that kind of city that's, predominantly a high-rise city. But now, predominantly, there's high-rises everywhere. So I had a few people asking me questions, and I wanted to kind of address that today. So if you are looking for a high-rise in Houston, Texas, I am your agent. I know how to do it. I know all the contracts. I know what to do. Okay? High rises. Call me.